My dear friends, the skeptic in the title, a skeptic's experience of Kundalini energy, is me. Instead of blabbering some new age mumbo jumbo or promoting myself as a guru, I'd like to take you to the recounting of the Kundalini awakening I had when I was around 21-22. You might wonder why I am hell-bound on narrating my experience to as many people as I can through YouTube videos, and for that I have a clear answer. I am not making a path to gurudom or fame, nor am I starting a cult. I just want you guys to know that the Kundalini energy is as real as the shit you dumped this morning. Maybe more real than that. Though it's known as Kundalini Shakti, Kundalini Serpent, and by other names which we easily relate with Hinduism, Yoga, Buddhism, and other Oriental occultism, mysticism, it's been prevalent in people from all races and religions, and even in skeptics like me. More about that later. First hear my story of how I underwent a Kundalini awakening. Then you can decide for yourself whether I was hallucinating or you can science the shit out of my claim. Or if you are an evangelist, you could also try kicking the Satan out of me. Back in those days, I was deep into religions and finding God. I had just dropped out of high school after repeatedly escaping from hostel in the wee hours. I prayed to Jesus, made Krishna my imaginary friend, surrendered to the universe, but never knew or believed that Kundalini energy that I'd read about a little here and there is real. Neither had I met or read about anyone who had gone through the Kundalini awakening process. I had heard just some stories on how a Kundalini awakening could bring some occult powers in humans, like levitation, telepathy, clairvoyance, etc. etc. I used to feel a deep sense of sadness everywhere I looked. Like I would look at a beautiful girl, I would imagine her passionately making love with me. Then we'd get bored with each other, and that loving relationship would just be a compromise called marriage. Life would go on. She would grow old, have wrinkles, and so would I. Then she would die. I would die. And I would cry at the utter meaninglessness and emptiness. Thus, all my imagined relationships would end before they even started. As the tumultuous teen years passed, I found myself worrying more about what I should be doing with my life, how I should earn my living, and all the problems everyone goes through during that phase. The sense of meaninglessness in me grew day by day, to the point that one day I found myself wondering if life was worth living at all. It was a gloomy day. Rain had been pouring down through the fog for hours since morning. The hopelessness within me was so heavy that I had been contemplating to end all this misery. I walked to a secluded hill and stood for minutes soaked in the outpouring rain. As I stood there, drenched in my misery, my mind was fogged, and my heart was nothing but pain. I hadn't lost anyone or anything, and yet I felt I had lost everything. I had been standing there with my eyes closed with a question repeating itself in my dark mind. Why am I going through this pain? Who or what controls my life? After some minutes, when I opened my eyes, I saw that the rain had slowed down to a drizzle, and sun rays had pierced down through the dark clouds. The fog was clearing away. Something extraordinary happened within me as I looked at the green leaves of the nearby trees, beautifully illuminated by the sun rays, and heard the birds starting to chirp and sing after the tiresome shower. I felt a peaceful presence within me. Let's not call it divine, because it was always me. It was the core of my being, but somehow had been clouded by all the gloominess of pain and suffering. And I had always taken this sad, empty mortal to be me, whereas I was always there. silent, bright and peaceful, aloof and empty, and yet full of joy. That, I guess, was what people call a spiritual awakening. The realization that deep within me I was something else, not the troubled mind, had a profound effect on my psyche, because after that I felt I had got a glimpse of myself, and never had dismal thoughts and feelings, or even if they appeared, I learned to manage them as they weren't inherently me or mine. That thing I saw back there could never be corrupted or tainted. It was the pristine, primordial awareness. Funny it may sound, but to reach that state which was the real me, I devoted more into meditation and surrender, surrendering everything I believed to be me to the universe, and watching my thoughts and feelings, which I believed were not mine. I followed this regular routine of some breathing exercises, watching my mind get filled with thoughts and emotions, watching the breath coming in and going out, and finally lying down in a state of complete surrender. As I was watching the breath passing in and out of the nose, I felt some tension being built up in the perineum. I had been experiencing some strange phenomenon going on in that region for a few days. It felt like something crawling in the perineum region. Many times I had felt as if some bugs were crawling down there, and had even checked by going stark naked and looking for lice or fleas in the underwear. But that evening I understood it wasn't some bug, as the crawling sensation escalated into a feeling of tremendous pressure, along with heat in the area right between the anus and the genitalia. The feeling of pressure and heat was so much that I felt some dormant volcano was about to erupt. Can you guess what happened after that? You guessed correct. But before I explain how the volcano, or whatever the fuck it was, erupted, let me remind you again, I'm not into self-aggrandizement, nor do I dwell in grandiose delusions. Neither had I buried my head deep into occult imaginations, especially not Kundalini, nor had I taken any psychedelics or psychoactive drugs, though I must confess I have tried many of them, but not on that fucking evening or days prior to that incident. It was only years later that I realized that the experience I had was a Kundalini awakening experience. I labeled it much later when the internet arrived in my little village, and coincidentally I happened to meet people on the internet who had gone through or going through similar experiences. So my purpose for this recount is simple. I was unaware that such a phenomenon really exists, and even if I had read some tidbits about this mysterious energy coiled up in the perineum, I'd never believed or known for sure it really exists. Many of you who are listening to this, I know, are in the same boat. Back then, I would have asked the same questions you'd ask if our government proclaimed, "Hey sheeple, our scientists have just confirmed that there's really a mysterious energy coiled up near your ass, and the scientists are working on how to raise it up to make all of you into super beings and unravel the mysteries of the universe by yourself." Most of us would cry out, "Oh, for God's sake, stop feeding us your conspiracy theories, fringe theories, pseudoscience, and blah blah blah." Hindus, Buddhists, and others would shout out in accord, "We were fucking correct," though most of them would have never experienced it themselves. Christians would whine about the government being led by Satan, but many inquisitive people would inquire, "Why is Kundalini energy coiled up down there? What happens if Kundalini goes up? How did the yogis know about this Kundalini energy? What can we do to raise it up to the Sahasrara chakra? What's the benefit in this all? How did the scientists confirm its existence? What paradigm shift ensues after the affirmation of Kundalini energy's existence? You might be expecting answers from me, but I have none. I believe no one has so far. My sole purpose is to inform you that this elusive energy, which many of you must have taken to be a religious myth, or a fancy of the deluded, or the holy grail of the occultist and New Age people, does in fact exist. My own experience, backed up by experience of people from all around the globe and from all walks of life and religions and beliefs, atheists and agnostics, Christians and Muslims, blacks and yellows, gays and queers, murderers and saints, drug addicts and teetotalers. Think of all the walking contradictions. All have had it. And just like a disease, the observations and symptoms match. It's not that a Christian experienced the Holy Cross rising up his butt, or a Muslim hears an Inshallah droning up his spine, or a guy on LSD sees hallucinogenic figures rising up the spine. We have felt the same thing. A form of energy, hot and electric in nature, rises forcefully up the spine and blows up around where our parietal lobe is situated. Don't be confused with my experience, because I'm not trying to convince you that my form of meditation, pranayam, letting go and surrendering to the universe, is the correct way of raising this energy, as the Kundalini awakening had never been my intention. I wasn't even sure that it really existed. To be precise, reading the little Hindu, Buddhist and yoga literature, I had felt that even if it was real, it was only for adept yogis who spent their whole lives following strict yogic austerities. But I smoked, dwelt on sexual fantasies, worried, envied, and fapped almost every day. So, when the volcano felt about to erupt, with the intensity and pressure of the heat rising, the two feelings I had were amazement and fear. My mind was thinking, what the fuck is going on? And the other brain was readying itself with fear. Aren't we afraid of the unknown? But my position was exactly like that of a feather being swept away in the wind. I had no choice. Maybe it was because of the surrendering practice I had been going through. I was like, come hell or high water, I'm going to observe it even if it's the apocalypse. Then, amidst the confusion and gut-wrenching fear, the energy that was building up its intensity erupted and started moving up my body, to be specific, along the spinal column. If I had to describe the way the energy traveled along the spine, the best words would be like a ball of fire pushing itself up in a narrow chimney congested with thick black soot. And when the energy reached the neck, I felt like I was going to die. Something was blocking the energy from going upwards. There was a tremendous build-up of tension around that area and up in the head, and I felt if the energy blasted its way through the blockage, my head would explode into splinters. The fear was so great that a part of me decided to wake up from this experience. But funnily, like I said before, who makes the decisions when everything you do is surrender? I was at the mercy of this unknown and uncontrollable energy. Explode it did, but without sound, and my brain didn't turn into little pieces. The explosion was in a way the climax for me, followed by a soothing experience after the tremendous pressure on the head. When I say explosion, it was literally an explosion for me. The energy burst at the crown, and just like when fireworks explode and multicolored sparks sour, I felt sour of sparks all over my head. The sparks on the tongue felt exactly like having a lot of popping candies in the mouth. Some form of electric current was passing through the head, from point A's to point B's. Those sparks would feel somewhat pricking, but when they subsided, the point would feel a type of pleasure, just like some skin part itches, and when you scratch it, you feel relieved and a mild sense of pleasure. Eventually, all the pressure climaxed into a feeling of relaxation. That's what I experienced, and later, after studying on the internet, concluded it to be a Kundalini awakening. I found most people who have had such an experience always have a uniform experience, that of energy rushing up the spine and reaching the crown, though other experiences that come up as the energy climbs up could be different for different individuals. Now, I don't want to delve into topics like how we can awaken the Kundalini, or how Kundalini transforms our lives, or what supernatural powers we get endowed with after Kundalini awakening, or what are the dangers of Kundalini. There are incredible teachers for all such questions if you seek. My point is just this, and listen to me very carefully. Kundalini is fucking real. Period. You might be an atheist just like me, an agnostic, a pantheist, a skeptic, or whatever, but there's really this mysterious energy within us that has been talked about a lot in ancient texts. Present-day science might not have confirmed its existence, but the experience of people all around the globe confirms it. Interestingly, with the uniform experience of energy rushing up the spine, which has been termed as the spinal sweep. Since the awakening, I'm no longer worried about the emptiness and meaninglessness in my life, because I accept it as it is. Neither am I worried about what meaning I should give to this life that I consider to be mine. Our lives are boringly empty and yet fascinatingly full. It's just like consciousness and energy. Our conscious energy is at its play, and we are nothing but, just like Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. And to end it all, we know nothing about how this universe works.